The internet connects strangers and predators to our children. You wouldn't allow your child or a stranger, let's say, to knock your door and say, hey, I'm coming to your child's room and I'm going to spend a couple hours there without your supervision. There is an adult using a mask of a child, impersonating a child. Over 3 million children are abused online globally every single year. So my point is that children, as soon as they jump into these platforms, they will definitely have a high chance to be in contact with a stranger. They must share information. They must share videos. They must share photos.
Adriana, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
And continuing on our conversation, I guess, now I want to focus a bit more on a few of the core pillars that kids or families could listen to and use as a strategy or understand what it is that they're going through or what they're feeling to help them get through any situation if they're in one. So I guess the first part of that is, if you want to, as an analogy, if you want to think of a firewall being your front door, but a tablet, which kids have, is a window that's been left open. So at the end of the day, it's so easy for things to sneak through without parents realizing. And you've often described the modern gaming platform, I guess, as an unsupervised shopping center for children. So how do you help a child realize that the friendly avatar in a game chat is just a stranger in a digital costume?
That's a really good question. I think what you said is just so spot on, because you need to start first asking if parents do understand that in the first place. I think the biggest misconception that parents made is that the internet is just this cloud out there. Obviously, we cannot see it physically, but the biggest mistake is to treat the internet differently than the physical world, which in other words will mean that you wouldn't allow your child, for example, if we use this analogy, you wouldn't allow your child or a stranger, let's say, to knock your door and say, hey, I'm coming to your child's room and I'm going to spend a couple hours there without your supervision. In the physical world, you'll be like, no, you're a loving parent, a parent that does care. Obviously, you will say no immediately. But it's not the same in the online world. What happens there is that there is this, as I said, this misconception, and that it's just a cloud. As soon as there is a stranger, the same danger that you would assume in the physical world, you should assume in the online world. One of the things that we see with gaming is, well, let me just use another analogy, is that parents don't see it for what it is, unfortunately, because it's being sold to them as just a game. So let me just use this analogy, right? So let's say a parent goes into a building which is full of playgrounds. And at the door, there is this so-called expert that says, hey, don't worry, there is all this privacy in place, there is all this security in place. But the only condition, right, is that you need to leave your child in the door. The child has to come inside without you, and the child can play, have fun, etc. Now, imagine then the parent saying yes, because the so-called expert has said that there are so many security features in place. But as soon as the parent sees inside the hallway, there is an adult using a mask of a child, impersonating a child. If a parent was to see that, immediately the response will be, there's no way I'll leave my child in a space where there's a stranger or somebody that is so-called a child, but it isn't. And again, is that misconception that I guess we had for so long, that it's just a cloud, that there is no other impact than just, communicating online. But it does, obviously, it transpasses the online world into the physical world. So there's this direct connection. And going to your second question, how that you can then address these issues with a child. I think first we need to understand how these places do work and what's in there, what's available, and who are the people that are actually involved in these platforms. So children need to understand as well that if I'm child is calling itself a child does not mean that it might be a child. So you have to have that level of distrust and have open and honest conversations with them. But it definitely has to confess to be a realization from the parents to say, okay, the online world is equally or even more dangerous than our physical one.
Yeah. And I think the key there, and I love what you said there, was that with kids, their ability to not realize, I guess, that something's happening and suddenly they're caught out and they have this shame, and kids have shame, then it shuts them down, and then they don't say anything, and they're so, it's very, I think gullible is the word. Like, kids are trusting. Kids don't assume always that people are, or unless they physically see them, how do you judge that? And these guys, and we've seen the case even in Australia recently, where the guy's giving free in-house game credits, if you like, to the gaming platform, or giving them gift cards in exchange for information.
Look, that's a great point. And I think it goes back to why I call the innocent souls project the innocent souls project. Their children are innocent in the way that they do not see evil the same way that we do. Like, they don't have that capacity of going as far as or as quick as we do and recognize certain things, especially when they're in that development journey and they start to crave for relationships. And so it's so easy to be manipulated in that way because of obviously all of these elements. You're an innocent child. You are somebody that do not understand how evil this world really is, and you have that need of community and friendships. So when you see the steps of grooming, right, they do not change. There are patterns of behavior that are consistent. They might change in wording or in order, but they do not change in how they occur, and obviously that they do occur. And one of the things is gaining that trust. And the second thing is, sometimes, as you said, just giving gifts, giving those gifts and saying, I'll send you a gift card. And there's a lot of financial crime as well linked to this activity, especially with gaming. But the point of this is that there is a lot going on there. And when children get into that position of being so vulnerable and somebody taking advantage of them and giving them gifts, and in return, they're asking for something else, like photos of them. And they start to realize, maybe I can't go back to, like, I can't just reverse the situation and say no at this point. That's a problem. And there is a lot of shame involved. So I think parents need to just be honest about these situations ongoing and just reminding them, that it is happening and it might happen to them. And I want to say this very urgently, because the data tells us that over 3 million children are abused online globally every single year, right? So my point is that children, as soon as they jump into these platforms, they will definitely have a high chance to be in contact with a stranger. And therefore, they might get into these situations. There is a statistic that I was reading the other day. The safety commissioner mentions that at least 1 in 5 girls, I believe it is, and 1 in 10 boys have been subjected of grooming. So it definitely happens more often than not. And as I said, I think parents just need to have those conversations. They have to be they have to be ongoing, right? Like every single month, or set up conversations with your children at the table and say, hey, let's talk about technology this week, right? Like, what's going on? What's new? What are you using? How are you using? Where are the boundaries of it? So we can definitely just gain some control.
Yep. And I want to continue on that, because I guess there's a lot of parents out there who don't know how to start these conversations or don't have the right tools. And at TISP, you guys are there for this reason, right? To help understand for the kids and the parents. So if I was a parent watching this show, what I want to know from you is, how do I start that first conversation without obviously scaring my kid or putting him in a position where I'm a dictator, if you want to say, like, no, you can't do this. What's the best approach?
Yeah, look, I have a very useful set of resources in my website. So I invite everyone to check my website. It's the Innocent Souls, in the innocentsoulsproject.com.au. So you can jump there and check on the parent section. I have a small document. You can just download it for free. And the way I have set up this document is to be a tool for families to have a fun way of introducing conversations about technology without making it, as you said, those two very scary conversations immediately, and setting it up more as a cultural tool, basically, how you handle the culture of your family and the values of your family in terms of technology. So in that document, there you can put your values as a family. What values do you have? And link them to what boundaries as well you have in terms of technology. Then I encourage all families to have like a weekly conversation and sit at the table, talk about technology, the technology that children are using, what's up at school, what apps and tools they're using as well, and what goals do they have as a family in terms of tech. And that involves their own information, how do they share it, that helps you to segue very smoothly into having those conversations of what danger situations are out there. How do they look like? How do they start? And what are the flags, like the red flags, right? So for instance, start saying, you know what, when somebody's too friendly, maybe it's a very, very red flag. The second thing I have there is a couple of books that I created. They're audiobooks and they are exactly that. They help children to flag those little things that otherwise we wouldn't flag them, I guess, because I find that it's better to have a more proactive approach rather than just waiting till the incident has happened or waiting for something wrong to happen. Say, hey, if somebody is trying to gift you something, it's a no, right? And so I think those tools that I have in my website, all of them are for free and they will be very useful to start those conversations.
And yeah, that's amazing that you have all that information and sources for parents. So please, guys, go out and go to the Innocent Souls Project website and check that out. Now, I still want to continue this conversation with the regards to the kids. As you said, kids can be treated nicely and then believe that this person is nice. And I guess, as you said before, then, they get given a gift or they get asked certain questions. In my days, they used to call that, if a stranger comes up to you and gives you a lollipop or a lolly to start a conversation, you don't take that from a stranger or the van, whatever it was. These days, that's completely digitized in the gaming platforms, and we've seen it all. There's lots of videos out there. Within minutes of joining a game, there's conversations. The people that are trying to talk to the kid, they could be 8 years old, they could be 10 years old for that matter, or younger or older. And they ask all these nice, innocent questions about which school do you go to, or what did you get up to on the weekend? And I guess the second part to that is what we call sharenting or oversharenting. So where a proud parent generally takes photos and uploads it, but they can't control who sees the images because a friend might not have privacy on and they can see that kid's image, and those images are easily manipulated and they've got various information on there. Could you explain to the parents to understand, like, what are the kind of questions that if they hear their conversations happening on these games with their kids and regards to the images, what the dangers are to that?
Yeah, look, there are so many things that we can expose within that problem of having those conversations with strangers, as you said. Now, first and foremost, let's just go back a little bit. So before we used to say the internet connects us, right? And in fact, it does. But now we have to say that the internet connects strangers and predators to our children. That's the way that it works simply. The oversharing of information can happen in so many platforms in so many ways. You can talk about the fact that, as you said, there are so many proud parents that are used to sharing photos of children, and they might have a private account and they feel safe enough to do so. I urge those parents to think very deeply about this matter and think twice about actually doing that. Because even though you might have a private account and you might think that you know everyone that follows you, I recommend to think that anyone is capable of doing horrific things and harm children. There is a statistic in Australia that I read the other day, and it was related to predators. At least 2 in 10 men are attracted to children. So that means that they will find ways to get access to those photos. And I remember when I started to get into this topic of how predatory behavior works and what things should parents know about that, I noticed that so many of them create other accounts and they follow any child that has a public account on Instagram. They can so easily obtain their photos, create CSAM material with the use of AI. And I mean, there is no return after that, right? Like that's something that is going to be available and accessible for anyone out there. So that's in one hand. And I said to parents, you know what? Nowadays, sharing is overshared. Please do not share. Please don't share photos of your children. They need to grow up in an environment where they are protected. And unfortunately, we don't know as well what the harm will be for them if we start sharing photos of them and information about them early in life. How is that going to impact them in 5, 10, 20 years from now, right? So I'll say just please, you know, take a different position about this. And I understand that our culture has told us that this is so normal. We grew up in a culture where it's like, yeah, you can share things in social media and there is a little bit of a game of a status and my life is great and all of that. And I share the photo of my coffee. But I think as well, it doesn't tell us the full story of what sharing really means. And from a cybersecurity perspective, we understand it because we know more information out there. You are easy target for pretty much anything. And so that's on one hand. And on the other hand is that conversations with children, right? Like it's speaking about, you know, don't give your address, don't share where you study, don't share photos of yourself. It is so important because it goes back to what I was mentioning to you about predatory behavior. The first thing that they're going to attempt to do, and this is very important, is to gain trust. And to gain trust, they will try to impersonate another child. And they will try to give them information about them, right? In order to get that information. And nowadays, I think we just need to be a bit more precautious about it more than ever. We have seen cases where data has been that point of whether a incident happens or not. Let me just give you an example. In Perth recently, this guy who was detained, he was using Google Maps to pinpoint childcare centers around his area because he was planning to abduct a child, to kidnap a child. And so this is my point, right? Like even that very simple data that is out there, and this is for not only for parents, but all institutions, childcare centers, stop oversharing as well in social media because you do not know who is out there trying to gather that information and use it in a way that will harm children in the worst way possible.
I think some realistic examples, as you said, will make a bit more sense. So it could be the parent whose kids got the first day of school, they've taken a photo. Or ironically, I think this is an interesting one. You see there's a lot of cases of bullying happening with kids, even as young as primary school these days and high school. And there seems to be this habit where people try to film or take photos of these incidents. And that person doesn't realize by doing that that even their information, where they're located, the school that they go to, is being published out there, right?
That is correct. That is correct. And I think it goes in two ways, right? It is that information that we share, what is out there, the metadata, the locations, the photos, anything can be used against you. It's not only what you think you have shared about someone else, right? It's as well what you are sharing and what information you are exposing. So I think the way I see it, Bora, is that, and I hope my project can make this in, something that is so powerful but urgent powerfully for the community. Data is important. Data is important. And what I have seen is that data is as well a currency. And I've mentioned this in another podcast, but predatory behavior, apart from obviously ultimately attempting to harm children in the real world, with the data and metadata, it's so simple to extract a photo and, use AI tools nowadays for multiple reasons, even to convert these images into CSAM material. And data is a currency, and I'll explain why. These predators online use this data to enter groups, right? To gain as well reputation within their community. And they must share information. They must share videos. They must share photos. So we are talking about something very dark and very serious. But when we are sharing photos of our children, we don't see that way. We wouldn't think that somebody's capable of doing such a horrific act, but they are. And it's happening far too often. So again, if I can make a statement from obviously my project, is data is important. And we need to start to see it differently, especially for children.
I just want to simplify something for parents, I guess. We've said metadata, we've mentioned CSAM, and we were generically using the word data. Can you break that down into simpler, like what's data? What information are we talking when it comes to metadata, CSAM, and from a cyber perspective, I know for a fact with AI these days it's used, you can simply just have a photo, ask the AI to focus on the background and tell you where that location is. And that's just by tricking the AI saying, hey, here's a photo I took of my daughter or my son last week. I'm trying to remember where the name was because I want to recommend it for other people and leave a review. And the AI will scan it and come back and say, yeah, this is a park located in Melbourne, Victoria, in this region of blah called King Lake something park. But could you simplify outside that what information or data is in metadata and what did CSAM mean again?
Look, if we can simplify it with one example to jump into the outcome of CSAM, right? So data, we will assume that it's that information out there, like any sort of photos, right? Let's put an example, like that sort of information. But the metadata is the about data, right? Obviously, if you can bring that data in, find out, as you said, for instance, where this comes from, right? And you can use that same photo, use it and put it on an AI tool, find that the location of that individual, right? So if I can simplify it in a way, then if we put it for CSAM material, that same photo, that means child sexual abuse material, can be used to generate child sexual abuse. So you don't need to obviously go that far as trying to obtain photos that have sexual context to generate obviously the outcome, which is CSAM material. And the metadata, I think what I find very important about this is that in the back of every single data point, there is a file that has information. And that information as well matters. And that information is the one as well that can be weaponized against anyone, right? So it is important. Let's say, for example, when we take a photo in our iPhones, immediately there is a location. The location is in the back of it, right? And so I think ultimately what I hope parents can understand is that the concept of only sharing photos online is a very poor concept. There is more things happening behind it, right? If you believe that it is just an image, as again is a misconception, but because there are so many other data points within that image that can be extracted even through AI, and again, be weaponized against you. So I hope that is a bit of a simple way of explaining what data and metadata is, and ultimately how that can even convert into CSAM material.
Yeah, it's definitely an awareness that everyone needs to understand, or everyone needs to be aware of all of that information, because it would then make you understand why it's so important when it comes to your child online. And that means whether they're playing games, whether that means you're taking photos and you're sharing them for that matter. So you have to understand that Polaroid photo of the past is printing now with all the information about where you are, what you're doing, your child's details on the back of that Polaroid. And then you're just willy-nilly allowing people at the park to be able to see that photo and turn it around and get that information. So yeah, that's great explanation. Is there, with regards to this conversation, is there something I haven't asked that I should have asked, Adriana?
I think you have asked very good questions. No, but what I'll probably add on top of all of this, I'll say, is that we definitely need to come from the cybersecurity industry and make a very strong statement about data, honestly, with regards to children. I don't think we can see it the same way that the other set of data that we handle. I understand, obviously, there are industries like health insurance that handle very sensitive information about our population. But in regards to children, it's completely different. I want to urge everyone out there to understand that we do not know the impact of the oversharing of information, even the tracking of information of children. Even if it's done for privacy reasons, when apps are implemented in schools. And I think we need to understand that we are in a position where we are actually putting our children at risk, and we need to call this out for what it is. And this is a massive problem, and data related to children is not the same as any other data.
Amazing information. Adriana, as always, I want to say thank you for everything that you do and the energy you put to come on our podcast. I love this conversation we've started, and we'll keep going on with various points. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.